Good morning. We're going to be going over notes and quotes and questions over the acts today. And I'm writing a message to somebody, so don't think I'm just being boring up here, okay? Enjoy. Let's see what time was. Okay, everybody should be showing up. Anybody else there yet? Smyer? Woman Union?
Smyer's here.
Good morning.
Woman's here.
Hey, Hunter's going to state, right?
Yes, ma'am.
I saw that. So, congratulations. Whoop, whoop. When is state? Do you know when it is?
I think it's April 21st.
State? Is that early? Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
Seeing as the last time I took the kids there was the last week of school in May, right before graduation. Wow. Cool. So I just have to say, I worked the meet for ready writing, and it was rather interesting. they put us in a different room over at SBC than we've been in before, and so time came for the students to print, and they didn't have the computers hooked up, they didn't have them set where they'd print, so we all had to go in and use our copy codes to print their papers. Showed me how many copies I've made. It was rather scary, that's all I gotta say. So, I'm hoping things will be better this week with the computer. You guys were lucky. You guys actually got to watch all of Act 2. My 9 o'clock class, it stopped at the video stopped at the same point during the to be or not to be speech, and then it would no longer allow me to have access to the DVD player. So it was kind of like crazy. Oh, wow. Wow. I can't believe they're doing state academics so early. That is crazy. Okay, so that's going to be tough on you, Hunter, because the research paper is going to be after that. She's got about a week after that. Wow. It's kind of good they're moving it up so it's not so close to final exams and graduation for people. All right. Let's go. Today, we're going to be covering, I'm going to go over the Act 1 questions, the Act 2 questions, and the notes and the quotes on those two acts. So those are important. Those are about the final exam, but it also is going to reinforce what you've read so that when you're writing the papers, you'll have a better idea where the information is. And I hope you remember, she told you how to use, to find that MIT version of Hamlet. They've got the find in so you can do all the words in. That's a wonderful video that I have actually embedded in all of my courses now so that I can say, hey, you can go there and learn how to use the databases. So, because I teach that online, so I feel really bad because my sophomore class had to do their paper before I had that, and they had a little bit harder time, some of them, finding material. So let's go over here, let's look at Act 1 questions, if I can find them. I opened up all the documents a second ago. So they're all just kind of hanging around waiting for me to finish this. Okay. And somehow Act 1 questions are hiding from me. Okay. I promise I know how to use a computer. Maybe. Close. Close that. Don't say. I typed up a little thing to help out. Show all. Here we go. Act 1 questions. Okay. There we go. Okay. Now I'm where I need to be, and I'll stop saying and okay. All right, Act 1 questions. I hope you have them out. So the curtain opens up. What's the setting, the place, and the time? Anybody know off the top of their head? I'm not just going to give you the answers. I'm going to see if you guys can remember. What's the name of the castle? Any ideas? No? Well, we're on the ramparts of the castle Elsinore in Denmark, and it's midnight. And the next question says, why is Francisco happy to see Bernardo? This is one of the guy on the ramparts. Why is he happy to see the other guy?
Because he could go home. He was finished.
He was finished
with
his
watch.
Awesome. Yeah. He was finished. So you would be too. And it's midnight. And let's imagine, there's not electricity in Denmark at this time. And it's cold. It's not like as it's been the past few days here in Lubbock in April, and we've got 90-degree temperatures. I probably got a little sunburn from the weekend, So Francisco's happy to see Bernardo because he can go home. He's finished his shift. And Bernardo's, kind of like iffy about what's going on. Why has Marcellus begged Horatio to join in the watch? What's been showing up there on the ramparts the past few nights?
The ghost.
The ghost. And they choose Horatio because who's his best bud? Who's Horatio's best friend? What's the name of our play?
Hamlet.
There you go. There's a giveaway, right? And so, you know, these guys are up there and they've seen this ghost and it looks like somebody, but they're not sure because, you know, they weren't good friends with the royalty. So they asked somebody they feel like could really identify who the ghost is. So that's why they asked for Horatio to come. And he's more approachable. And so what does the ghost look like? He looks like King Hamlet, the dead King Hamlet. What does he do? He gets up there and he walks around and he tries to speak and he points a finger, and that's what he does. And then he disappears when the cock crows, and he says nothing, but they have the feeling he's trying to talk to them. Okay. So question 5, what was the outcome of the fight between King Hamlet and Fortinbras?
He was killed.
Yes, Fortinbras is killed by King Hamlet, and this would be King Fortinbras. He's killed by King Hamlet, and in that ensuing battle, what happened between the two of them, obviously if you have the kings fight, it takes, you know, you're not having all your troops fight. But Denmark wins property from Norway. And so this kind of sets up with a problem, which is the next question, which is, why is there a need for a nightly watch at the palace? Who's creating problems? It wouldn't be old Fortinbras because he's dead. It's going to be his son, who is, what's his son's name? It's a catchy name. We've heard it before. Remember how these kings like to name their kids after themselves? So it's going to be
Young Prince Fortinbras.
Young Prince Fortinbras. And what is he wanting to do? He is
He wants revenge on Hamlet.
That's right. He wants revenge on Hamlet. So what he's done is he's actually creating levies. He's trying to get men to join up to go back and take back that land that Denmark took from Norway. And on page 1117 in the textbook, we have Claudius. He says, we have writ, it's about line 26, 27. We have read here to Norway, uncle of young Fortinbras, who, impotent and bedrid, scarcely hears of this his nephew's purpose, to suppress his further gate herein, his further movement into Denmark, and that the levies, the list, and full proportions are all made out of his subject. And so what Claudius is doing, he's sending Voltaman to Norway to ask that they get some control over young Fortinbras. And that's why there's a need, because there's no telling what young Fortinbras is going to do. So from the beginning, he is much more decisive. I don't know if he's acting rashly because he's bothering to raise an army to take with him. But he is decisive. He's going to go get back what was taken from his country and revenge for his father. Unlike Hamlet, who's, you know, a little bit slower. Okay, so scene 2 takes us to how are Claudius, the dead King Hamlet, and King Gertrude related? This part of it sounds like a bad soap opera. Claudius was the brother to the dead King Hamlet, and therefore the brother-in-law to Queen Gertrude. Except now he's married to her, so it makes him the brother-in-law to his dead brother. I don't know. And, well, obviously husband to Gertrude. This is a very basic, this is what they did in the Bible. If you go back and look in the Old Testament, when you would have a woman was widowed, and then they believed in polygamy. The Hebrews did back then. They believed in polygamy, so when a woman's husband died, if she had no children, the brother would marry her so that she could have a child. And so that she would have someone to take care of her in her old age. And that's how you took care of the widows and the orphans. You know, you're supposed to do that kind of thing. I just got through, for some reason I decided to reread Ruth. And basically that's what happens with her and Boaz, and it just so happens that The child they have is Obed, who's the father of Jesse, who's the father of David. So this is somebody who's in the lineage of Jesus. Kind of interesting. Kind of cool to read. I just finished Ruth last night. But basically, it's a biblical principle that you would do that. Now, I'm not saying that we should be doing that in 1100 or in 2000. But back in, biblical times, it was a very common practice. All right, so what is in the letter Claudius is sending to the alien king of Norway? Already gone over it. Get your nephew under control because he is making us nervous. So here is Claudius, whose brother has done this, and he's now usurped that throne, and now he's worried about somebody taking the throne away from him. So there's tension for Claudius to begin with right there. So who is Laertes? Any ideas?
The son of
Polonius'
Polonius.
son.
The son of Polonius. And why does he want to leave Denmark? We've gone over that. Would you rather stay in Elsinore, or would you rather go to, where's he going?
France.
Specifically,
Paris.
Paris. You want to go to the Metroplex. You don't want to go to the little hamlet where Belle's with, the beast. You want to go to Paris where all the good things are happening. It's interesting that if we talk about 1100, you are going to be approaching plague times. So why does he want to leave Denmark? He wants to go back. He wants to be a young man having a good time. All right? So the next question why is young Hamlet grieving? His father's dead. It's only been, as the play began, it's been less than 2 months. Okay? And how do Claudius and Gertrude treat his grief? I find this very interesting, what they do. Basically, they both say, get over it. It's that almost puritanical notion that you don't need to grieve. He's dead. We're all going to die. He had a father. His father died. His father died. Everybody's going to die. So why are you grieving? And you're like, well, it was your husband. It was your brother. You guys didn't grieve at all. So they're very disrespectful. And obviously that shows in how quickly, they remarried. So why is the king planning the celebration? Do we have any clear ideas on that?
I wasn't sure, but I put to celebrate Hamlet not going away and staying home.
Yeah, that's part of it. It's also kind of serving a little bit to celebrate his marriage. What Dane wouldn't like to have a good party? Because there's that whole background later on of that when Hamlet says it would be better if we didn't practice these kind of celebrations. So, who is Horatio?
Hamlet's best friend.
Yeah, you could just call him his BFF. And what does he reveal to Hamlet? He says, guess what?
That he's seen a ghost.
That he's seen the ghost, and the ghost looked as much like his father as Horatio's hands look like his hands. So there's no doubt in Horatio's mind that he has seen the dead King Hamlet. So then we move on to scene 3. And what advice does Laertes give to Ophelia?
That Hamlet's love isn't forever and not to fall for him.
That's right. Beware of rich young men. It's pretty standard information, isn't it? And the advice that Polonius gives to Laertes is much of it, a lot of it has moved into kind of contemporary sayings that have been misinterpreted, and we'll go over those in the notes and quotes. But basically, he says, neither borrow nor a lender be, and to thine own self be true. And he's got this long list of stuff he says, like give thy thoughts no tongue, be thou familiar but by no means vulgar. Those friends thou hast in their adoption tried, grapple them unto thy soul with hoops of steel. Keep your friends close. Beware of quarreling. So he gives a lot of interesting information. And then what advice does Polonius give to Ophelia? The advice there is pretty basic. It says, I'm going to go to the very end of it. He says, I would not, in plain terms from this time forth, have you so slander any moment's leisure as to give words or talk with the Lord Hamlet. Look to it. And the way he says that in the movie is very interesting. It's almost like a command, like he's hollering at a dog. Look to it, very sharp. He says, I don't want you to see, talk, I don't want you to have anything to do with him. And she says, I shall obey, my lord. In scene 4, that's where we get how Hamlet feels about the drunken revelry. It's on page 1125. It begins on the right-hand column at the top line, where he says, it is a custom more honored in the breach than the observance. And that means it's better if we didn't do it than if we did it. That they have this bad reputation for being partiers and not, it's not a good reputation to have. It says, they clap us drunkards, and with swinish phrase soil our addition. So clap in that instance means call us. That's what everybody calls him. So what mixed feelings does Hamlet have when he sees this ghost? What are reactions? He has several. Begins on 1126 at line about 39, Hamlet speaks. He says, angels and ministers of grace defend us. So his first exclamation is one of shock and surprise. Be thou a spirit of health or goblin damned, bring with thee heirs from heaven or blasphemy. He says, I don't know if you're from heaven, I don't know if you're from hell, but be thy intense wicked or charitable, thou comest in such a questionable shape that I will speak to thee. I'll call thee Hamlet, King, Father, Royal Dean, oh answer me. So he's shocked, maybe a little bit excited at the same time because it looks like it's his dad. And, then he's got that questioning going on. And why doesn't Horatio want Hamlet to follow the ghost? What scares him about that? He says on 1126 on the right-hand column, he says, what if it tempts you toward the flood, my lord, or to the dreadful summit of the cliff that beetles over his base into the sea, and there assume some other horrible form which might deprive your sovereignty of reason and draw you into madness? So what if he tries to push you into the water, or what if he drives you crazy? And there's a real possibility that maybe that's what happens. And Hamlet says, it wafts me still, go on, I'll follow thee. He says, to heck with that, I'm going to go on. So then we get to what does the ghost tell Hamlet? He says, I am thy father's spirit, doomed for a certain time to walk the night, and for the day confined to fast and fires. And he says, I would tell you more about death, but I'm forbidden to do it. And then right at the bottom on 1127, his long speech right there, he says, list, list, oh list, which is short for listen. If thou didst ever thy dear father love, he says, revenge his foul and most unnatural murder. Murder, most foul, as in the best it is, but this most foul, strange and unnatural. He says, I was murdered. Now this is interesting. If the ghost is murdered, how would he know he was murdered? He didn't see it. So you still don't have that witness in one sense, except he knows he's dead. But one of the interesting things that the ghost tells him is that he says, oh, that incestuous, that adulterate beast, with witchcraft of his wit, with traitorous gifts, a wicked wit and gifts that have the power so to seduce one to his shameful lust, the will of my most seeming virtuous queen. Now there's when you call her seeming virtuous, it might make you question whether maybe she was having an affair with Claudius before, but it's hard to tell. But the ghost goes on to describe it quite clearly how he was murdered. He says at the bottom of 1128, but soft methinks I scent the morning air, brief let me be, sleeping within my orchard, my custom always of the afternoon upon my secure hour, thy uncle stole, with juice of cursed Hebona in a vial, and in the porches of mine ear did pour that leprous distilment. And then he goes on, thus I was sleeping, and this is the important part that's going to be very important to Hamlet later on. And thus was I sleeping by a brother's hand of life, of crown, of queen at once dispatched, cut off even in the blossoms of my sin, unhoused, disappointed, unanaled, no reckoning made, but sent to my account with all my imperfections on my head. He says, I was killed, and I didn't have the opportunity to confess my sins and be granted absolution. So what the ghost is saying is, I am stuck in hell because I was not able to ask for forgiveness for my sins. And that becomes important to Hamlet later on, because when he thinks about killing Claudius, he goes, but if he's confessed his sins, then he'll go to heaven. And I don't want him to go to heaven, I want him to go to hell. So that it creates some problems there for him. But, and I really like the way that Paul Scofield interpreted that. But he does say it there, how to free Claudius. He says, get revenge. But on Gertrude, he says, as for, taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother, aught. Leave her to heaven. Which is also one of those big sayings we get out of this play. And then the last question in this act is, what does Hamlet make Horatio and Marcellus swear? He makes them swear not to say anything about what they've seen, about what they know. Because he's already in his mind constructed this elaborate plot, how maybe he can, try to get this revenge, but, his first thought is, I'll pretend to be crazy. That's not necessarily what I consider a time of reflection to decide what to do it. But he says, I don't want you to tell anyone, because if the word gets out that the ghost of the dead king is haunting the castle, Claudius is going to start thinking, people are going to connect the dots. You only haunt if you have unfinished business. That's that whole notion of why we have ghosts. And so, but Hamlet also says, it is an honest ghost, touching this vision here, it is an honest ghost, let me tell you that. But he says it's an honest ghost, but he still doesn't trust the information he gives it, so it's kind of interesting. And then he swears them to be quiet because he goes, I might be doing some strange stuff, so I don't want you to be worried about me. And that basically gets us through Act 1. Okay, so I'll switch over here to Act 2. Oh, that's notes and quotes. Let's see, Act 2 questions. Here they come. All right. So in Scene 1 of Act 2, why does Polonius send Rinaldo to Paris? This is one that gets left out, but I think it's kind of interesting. It supports one of those themes that people are always suspicious of other people, so they spy. That spying, it's like eavesdropping, spying and eavesdropping. You never learn good about the person. So Polonius sends Rinaldo to Paris to spy on Laertes. He doesn't trust his son. He says, inquire me first what dancers are in Paris, and how and who, what means, and where they keep. What company and at what expense? I'm on page 1131. He said, by this encompassment and drift of question, ask if they know my son. Come near, to his particular friends and touch on it. Say, do you mark this? And Rinaldo goes, sure, yeah, I'll do it. And he goes on and say, make up some lies about my son, and to see if they agree with it and say he's doing that or if he's behaving. Find out if he's gambling, wenching, all those things. I'm kind of struck by a dad that would do that. That's a little odd. I mean, do your parents spy on you? Are you aware? Do they check your phone for who you've been texting? Do they check your browser history? I see some is that Connor nodding his head? Your parents check your browser history? All right. Interesting. Who is it? I was watching something and that question came up and you're like, the person said, don't worry, I deleted your browser history, so I didn't want to know what you were looking at. But, parents are suspicious, and it's probably because we did the same wrong things that you're doing. That's probably what's going on, except we didn't have the internet, We just snuck out of house. Instead of, messing on the internet, we would sneak out of house at night, right? All right, so why is Ophelia frightened by Hamlet? And I thought this was beautifully done in the Gibson version of it, that instead of reading about it or hearing Ophelia tell Polonius about it, you have it acted out about how my lord, I'm on 1132, the right-hand column, my lord, as I was sewing in my closet, Lord Hamlet, with his doublet all embraced, nor hat upon his head, his stockings fouled, ungartered and down-gyved to his ankle, pale as his shirt, his knees knocking each other, and with a look so piteous in purport, as if he had been loosed out of hell, to speak of horrors, he comes before me. And it's a beautiful reenactment of what she's describing there. He took me by the wrist and held me hard. Then he goes to the length of all his arm, and with his other hand thus o'er his brow, he falls to such perusal of my face as I would draw it, as if he would draw it. Long stayed he so. At last he leaves with a sigh so piteous and profound as it did seem to shatter all his bulk and in his being. I thought that was pretty cool, how they did that. This done, he lets me go, and with his head over his shoulder turned, he seemed to find his way without his eyes. For out of doors he went without their helps, and to the last spended their light on me. saying that he stared at her as he left the room, and that was very well done in that movie. So, then we have Polonius trying to explain this behavior. And Polonius says, right below that description by Ophelia, he says, "Come, go with me, I will go seek the king. This is the very ecstasy of love, whose violent property foredoes itself and leads the will to desperate undertakings, as oft as any passion under heaven that does afflict our natures." So Polonius is firmly convinced that that Hamlet has gone mad because of Ophelia's rejection. And what goes on in his actions for the rest of the play that he's in it all have to do with he wants to prove that he is right. He wants to prove that Hamlet has gone crazy because of the loss of Ophelia's love. He doesn't want to hear any other explanations. There are no other explanations as far as he's concerned. But then he doesn't have that knowledge that Claudius has. Claudius thinks something else is going on, but Claudius knows he killed Hamlet's dad, so he knows there's some problems there. So is he right? There's a possibility that Hamlet is a little crazy. I mean, he's talked to a ghost. His girlfriend's rejected him, Maybe that's just a nice concatenation of things going on, but, that doesn't necessarily mean he's crazy, but it could mean there's a line of thought that Hamlet is actually a little off. So we go to scene 2. Who are Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? Besides one guy with a really bad haircut. And why have they come to Elsinore? I would say an easy way to think of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern is that they are like fraternity brothers of Hamlet and, Horatio maybe. They've come to Elsinore, though, at the request of the king. He says, "Something have you heard?" Let's see. "The need we have to use you did provoke our hasty sending." Page 1133. "Something have you heard of Hamlet's transformation, so call it, sith nor the exterior nor the inward man resembles that it was." He's not acting like he used to. "What it should be more than his father's death, that thus hath put him so much from the understanding of himself, I cannot dream of. I entreat you both, that being of so young days brought up with him, and sith so neighbor to his youth and behavior, that you vouchsafe your rest here in our court some little time, so by your companies to draw him on to pleasures, and to gather so much as from your occasion you may glean." So, just if you get the chance, find out what's going on with him. Whether aught to us unknown afflicts him thus that opened lies within our remedy, so that we can help him get better. Okay? Are they betraying their friend Hamlet? Would you spy on a friend for their parents? Anybody at Smire? Would you spy on your friends for if their parents were worried about them?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, now the way I phrased the question changed the whole view, didn't it? Well, if we talk about, when we sit here and we think we know Claudius has done wrong, spying on Hamlet is a result of his suspicion. But if I say, if you're concerned about your child and you want to ensure that they're not, going crazy, it's not unreasonable to say, "Hey, talk to them, see if you can find out what's going on, because I am so worried about my child. Would you please help me?" That seems a reasonable request, doesn't it? It doesn't seem like this evil thing to do. Yet, in a way, it is a betrayal. And that's a big theme in a lot of adolescent literature is that trust between a friend more important than the need to save your friend or to help them save themselves save a person from him or herself. And that's kind of interesting. So that gets us there. So yes, it looks like betrayal, but if I knew you guys, somebody had written something in an essay that indicated they were having problems, I would communicate to somebody that I think, somebody's got problems. That's just something you do because you're concerned about people, not to be tattletales. Okay, so what is the bedridden king of Norway's response to Claudius's request? This comes through Voltaman. He's come back from visiting the Norwegian quote, and he says, "Most fair return," on page 1134, "most fair return of greetings and desires. Upon our first, he sent out to suppress his nephew's levies, which to him appeared to be a preparation against the Polak. Apparently, Norway is going to go to war against Poland. But better looked into, he truly found it was against your highness." So Claudius was right to be suspicious of young Fortinbras. whereat grieved that so his sickness, age, and impotence was falsely borne in hand, sends out arrest on Fortinbras, which he in brief obeys, receives rebuke from Norway, and in fine makes vow before his uncle never more to give the estay of arms against your majesty. Whereupon old Norway, well, okay, so basically Fortinbras says, hey, you're right, I'm wrong, I won't do it anymore. And old Norway, excuse me, I'm battling the cold, overcome with joy, gives him 3,000 crowns an annual fee, and is commissioned to employ those soldiers so levied as before against the Polish, with an entreaty herein further shown, that it might please you to give quiet pass through your dominions for this enterprise on such regards of safety and allowance as therein are set down. So, I'm sitting here going, okay, so the king of Norway says he's so excited about his nephew saying, I'm not going to do that. I will not march against Denmark again. He gives him $3,000. Wow, you've been doing wrong, but I'm going to give you money because you told me you were doing it. And then he says, and on top of that, we would like you to allow us to march our soldiers across your land to go fight Poland. Does that sound like a reasonable request? Are we going to allow Mexico to march through the United States to make war on Canada? Would you do that with your country? To me, that's a little strange. I don't think I would allow another country to march through my... And yes, here we are, the U.S., we go into other countries all the time and fight battles for them, so a little scary there. But so there's this whole thing going on that maybe is not quite legit on that. So it's a nice underlying thing that all of a sudden Claudius was suspicious of Norway, no longer, and he says, sure, it likes us well. And at our more considered time, we'll read, answer, and think upon this business. And what we do know later on, he does allow them to march across Denmark to go make war through Poland, which doesn't mean like they're cutting across a little bitty corner. They're cutting across the entire, they're using the landfall in Denmark to march all the way through it to get to Poland. A little dangerous. I wouldn't allow an armed military in my country to go fight someone else. So, 4, who wrote the love letter that Polonius reads to Claudius and Gertrude? That would be Hamlet. And why does he read it? Because Polonius wants them to hear exactly what it says, and he wants to use it to reinforce his point that Hamlet is lovesick for Ophelia. And that's where we get this long kind of pontificating speech. It begins on 1135. Polonius says this business is well ended. And he goes, therefore, since brevity, line 90, therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit and tediousness the limbs and outward flourishes, I will be brief. He says, brevity is the soul of wit, I will be brief. He says, I'm not going to talk a long time. And he says, your noble son is mad, mad call it I, for to define true madness, who is it but to be nothing else but mad? Do we need 3 sentences to say that? No. And the queen then says, more matter with less art. Get to the point, stop talking around it. And Polonius says, madam, I swear I use no art at all. Either he's tongue-in-cheek or he's really kind of goofy, stupid. That he's mad, 'tis true, 'tis true, 'tis pity, and then he goes on to that, and pity, 'tis true. You know, he uses all of these art things that he says he's not going to do. So it reinforces our notion on Polonius being kind of a foolish, verbose kind of old man. So he likes to hear himself talk. So that's one reason why he reads it. So Polonius' plan for proving that Hamlet's odd behavior is the result of love madness is that they're going to get, now we've had Rosencrantz and Guildenstern have been brought in to spy on Hamlet. Now we're going to have Ophelia do it. We're going to set her up to be walking in that area, reading the book, where we know Hamlet paces every day for 4 hours. And that where there's going to be an encounter. They've set up some kind of an encounter. And so there's this, and while she's doing that, sorry, I was reading the question again. While she's doing that, the king and Polonius are going to hide behind an arras, which is basically a big tapestry, trying to cut down all the cold on all those stone walls in the castles. That's something, women had to do something while they were hanging around not fighting wars, so they made tapestries. So that's what's going to be. They're going to spy. They're going to try to overhear the conversation between Ophelia and Hamlet. And then we see 6. How does Hamlet feel about seeing his old friends Rosencrantz and Guildenstern? That was one of your questions on the quiz. He's excited, and then he's immediately suspicious. Why do you show up now? They didn't show up at the funeral, they didn't show up at the wedding, but they show up now. It's got to have been a few weeks since he's seen the ghost. And now all of a sudden they've shown up without even any real reason, so he's naturally suspicious. So there's this whole notion that you can't trust anybody else. And so they tell him, no, they just came. Well, we just came. It's not anything. Let's see. And that's when he says, by the way, what are you doing here in the prison of Denmark? And they go, this is not a prison. He goes, yes, it is. And if you stop and think about it, maybe for Hamlet it has become a prison. Let's see. What do they tell him? They say, well, we just came. And then he forces them to confess why he's come. And that's on 1139. He says, I will tell you why. So shall my anticipation prevent your discovery, and your secrecy to the king and queen molten of feather. I have of late, but wherefore I know not. Lost all my mirth, forgone all custom of exercises. And indeed it goes so heavily with my disposition that this goodly frame, the earth, seems to me a sterile promontory. This most excellent canopy, the air, look you, this brave overhanging firmament, this majestical roof fretted with golden fire, why it appeareth nothing to me but a foul and pestilent congregation of vapors. What a piece of work is a man! How noble in reason, how infinite in faculties, in form and moving, how express and admirable in action, how like an angel. In apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Man delights me not, no, nor woman neither. Though by your smiling you seem to say so. So they're kind of blowing off what he's saying, like, oh, he's just, singing a sad song. And that's when Rosencrantz says to him, to think, my lord, if you delight not in man, what entertainment the players shall receive from you. And so Hamlet's like, oh, players have come. And so there's a lot in here that's actually put in another scene. They've kind of mixed things together. But we do see Hamlet say, but he tells Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, I am but mad northwest. When the wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw. So he said, I'm not crazy all the time. That's on page 1141. Yeah, 1141. And so then we have some more interaction, and we find out some history about Polonius that's going to show up in Act 3 in the movie. You have some conversation with the players where Hamlet says, I'm going to write you some new lines that I need you to do. And then he continues talking, and he's got this long soliloquy after Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and the players leave, and he says, I so goodbye to you on page 1144. Now I am alone. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force a soul so to his own conceit, that from her working all this visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction is an aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting what forms to his conceit, and all for nothing. And he talks, Hecuba, queen of the witches. He talks about things. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain? Breaks my pate across. But I am pigeon-livered and lack gall. To make oppression bitter, or ere this, I should have fatted all the region kites with this slave's offal. If I truly wanted to get the revenge, I would have killed. Bloody, body villain, he's now talking about Claudius. Remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. O vengeance, why what an ass am I? This is most brave, that I, the son of a dear father murdered, prompted to my revenge, by heaven and hell, must like a whore unpack my heart with words and fall a-cursing like a very drab scullion. Fie upon it. Fa, about my brains. And then he starts thinking, I've heard that guilty creatures sitting in a play have by the very cunning of the scene been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. So he said, here's what's going to happen. We're going to put the play on, and it's going to mimic the death of my father. And he says, I'll be watching, I'll observe his looks, I'll tend him to the quick. If he do blench, I'll know my course. He wants verification that the Spirit has spoken the truth. I'll have grounds more relative than this. And he says, the play is the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Meaning that his reaction to the play, and it's a pantomime that will be done up front. There are two plays. The players are actually going to do the Murder of Gonzaga is the big play. The pantomime that it's done up front is called the Mousetrap. And that is what Hamlet has kind of created to help catch the king. Okay? So that was Acts 1 and 2. So we're going to go over now and look at notes and quotes. Act 1, 2. There we go. And this gives you a little more background information, okay? It's probably one of the most interesting plays, Hamlet, that Shakespeare wrote. It is a play that has been performed almost continuously for 600 years. Okay, and it's got it says allusions in it, it's for the scholars, but for us, we need to enjoy just what's going on with this fun plot and everything that happens in it. And this is the ambition of almost every actor to play Hamlet and to give his own interpretation, which we got to see. Remember when we watched the 2B, where you had all of those individuals, even the females in there. The first lady that spoke, she actually plays, in the David Tennant version of Hamlet, she plays Gertrude. And then, I can't remember, it's not Helen Mirren, it's the other one. Dame Judith, whatever. The one that plays them on the James Bond movies. They both have played Gertrude, Ophelia, because they're all very famous, and all the men have played Hamlet except for that ginger guy. Everybody else has had the opportunity. So it's one of those things that it's that epitome of a role because it allows. That's the central character. If you don't have a good Hamlet, you don't have a play. It has to be somebody in there. So, and there's a lot of psychological stuff going on in that particular play, and everybody wants to talk about his inhibitions and his prohibitions. So. The story is about 700 years old. It's an Elizabethan play, not a Victorian treatise on philosophy, and it was written to be acted in the Globe Theater, which is, an open-air stage, and it belongs to the revenge type. So here are some, down here in this offset area, there are the patterns in a revenge play. They include a crime, invariably a murder, whereby the duty of vengeance was laid on the next of kin, the discovery of the murderer by the avenger, usually a matter of some difficulty. The impediments to revenge are a part of it. There are things preventing it. The triumphant conclusion in which the murderer was appropriately destroyed. And also the avenger and half a dozen others must perish in one red ruin in the last act. That means bloody. And you have to include at least one ghost and a mad scene. And we get all of that in this play. And Shakespeare had an advantage, though, because people in his day would have known the story. You don't have to give exposition at the beginning of the play. He sets the mood, though, with a foreboding that there is something that's rotten in the state of Denmark. So that's kind of background information, and then these are the quotes to be aware of. All right? And so on the final exam, I'm just zooming up so you can see it better. On the final exam, what I'm going to do is there will be 5 or 6 of these quotes. You have to tell me who said it and what it means. You don't have to tell me what act it's in. I will give you all that information. I'll give you the act, the scene, the line numbers, and I'll give you the lines. And all you have to say, this is said by so-and-so, and it means this. That's all you have to do on the final. So, excuse me, I'm having some nose issues right now. The ghost appearance means trouble for Denmark, and the country is under threat of invasion already. It says Fortinbras of Sweden, but that should be Norway. That's a typo on mine. There are 4 reasons for the ghost to appear: to tell how to help him, to give warnings, to show buried treasure, and to reveal a crime against the self. So scene 1, act 1, scene 2 is a room in the castle. Claudius calls it quick attention to his marriage and obtaining the throne in the opening speech. This is an audacious display of self-confidence. They are inverted sentences, which means the objects become before the subjects and the verbs. And to kind of show his convoluted reasoning, he tells the audience that he is by temperament suitable for kingship and proves he is highly capable, but we know he lacks some credentials. Are we almost out of time? Oh, we got a little bit left. You're just early, Jenna. The first quote you need to know is Act 1, Scene 2, 64 through 65. A little more than kin and less than kind. Hamlet is speaking of his uncle Claudius, who is now too much kin to the prince. He's his uncle and his stepfather, and he's less than kind because he took the throne from his kin, the prince. The next lines are that, oh, this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and dissolve itself into a dew. Hamlet keeps coming back to the quick remarriage of his mother, and what he sees is her infidelity to his father. that it just has depressed him. He's like, if I could just melt away and not have to worry about my problems. And then you have Act 1, Scene 2, 142 and 146. Heaven and earth must I remember why she would hang on him as if increased frailty, thy name is woman. That basically is Hamlet saying that women are weak and should be given for those sins, I guess. In Scene 3, we start getting some of Polonius's lines, where he says, neither a borrower nor a lender being. Polonius is counseling his son Laertes about lending money to his friends, since it's risky. Have you ever loaned money to a friend? I have. Not a lot, but I would, $5, $10 here. I actually gave someone a microwave and they never paid me for it. And so then the problem is how do you ask a friend for the money they owe you? It becomes difficult. It's an awkward situation because it can lead to resentment on your part if you loan something to somebody. So sometimes it's easier to say, don't worry about it. That's why, give a kid $1, I'm not going to worry about $1 anymore. Now, this is the other thing he says that's really kind of interesting. Act 1, Scene 3, line 78, it begins with, this above all to thine own self be true, and it must follow us the night to day, thou canst not then be false to any man. Now, we just worry about the top line, this above all to thine own self be true. True for him means be loyal to an individual's own best interest. Take care of yourself first, then you can take care of others. It doesn't mean that you're being a good person. Being true to yourself means being honorable. That's not what it means. It means take care of number one. You're number one and take care of yourself. Now, in our movie version with Gibson, we did not get this line. Act 1, Scene 4, 87 to 91. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. The country of Denmark has lots of problems, and it starts at the top, and it smells like rotting fish. That is just not a pleasant phrase to think about. Act 1, Scene 5, 86 through 87 is, taint not thy mind, nor let thy soul contrive against thy mother aught, leave her to heaven. Do not include your mother in your vengeance. God will exact justice against her sins. And then the Act 1 ends with this line, there are more things in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. Having just talked with the ghost of his dead father, Hamlet has sworn Horatio, Marcellus, and others to secrecy that there's things we can't know about because of the ghostly apparitions. So those are the quotes you need to know about. I'm going to be honest, I don't ask anything about the revenge play, but it does help us keep focused on why we have the events we have in the play. Okay, and let me find, here's notes and quotes, Act 2. Oops, hit the wrong button. So, Scene 1, Polonius is sending Rinaldo to Paris to spy on Laertes. Ophelia is concerned about Hamlet's mental condition. Polonius embroils Ophelia in the plan to determine Hamlet's illness. In Scene 2, Claudius welcomes Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and asks them to ascertain what is affecting him, a.k.a. spy on Hamlet. His supposed friends from school I'm going to have to edit this, guys. I didn't realize there were these many typos in here. That's why you can't trust spell check, okay? Are more interested in the payment they will receive from the king for their services. So here's your first quote. I'll blow this up since I took it out of that form. It says, and this is Polonius speaking here on 2:290. Therefore, since brevity is the soul of wit. The irony of this phrase is that Polonius is denouncing the time wasted by rhetorical speechifying, but is himself guilty in this speech of that transgression. And that's because just a few lines later we get Queen Gertrude saying, more matter with less art. She impatiently demands this of the long-winded Polonius, a self-satisfied, tedious old man straight out of classical comedy who rapidly becomes annoying. He is the only funny person for the first 3 acts. There's not a whole lot more amusing unless you talk about some of Hamlet's crazy scenes. Act 2, Scene 2, 3:15. What a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculties. I read most of that to you. This is Hamlet speaking. And he said, man is the noblest of God's pieces of work, but Hamlet takes no delight in this. He is still too upset about what's going on in Elsinore. Then we've got the line that I gave you also, 2:360. I am but mad north-northwest. When the wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw. He tells his friend, see how that's in quotes, his madness is not a full-time problem. Sometimes he sees all too clearly. particularly when he's looking at their actions. And this one I had to bring out there, okay? Because we've heard the phrase God's vodka ban, but so much, what happens is that, oh, they're gone. Didn't get it finished. I'm gonna have to go blow my nose. I can't hardly breathe right now. I can't hardly breathe. I read a research paper yesterday, and it was a double negative, and they repeated things. I was like, I needed to quote, brevity was all the way to that student. She would repeat herself. She kept saying, Victor Frankenstein and the monster that he created. The monster that he created. Every time she would say the monster that he created, I'm like, if you've read Frankenstein, I know the story. You don't have to keep telling me that. Okay, gotta blow my nose.